Hello. Welcome to another museum FAQ video. I'm Paul Orselli, President and Chief Instigator at POW here on Long Island. And I am delighted to be joined today all the way from the sunny shores of Brazil by Lucimara Letelier. And now that I'm sure like the rest of you, been doing a lot of Zoom meetings and Zoom calls, I try and pick appropriate backgrounds. So I chose a background of the Palace Museum in Beijing, where Lucimara and I were actually instructors for the ICOM International Training Center in Beijing. And that's where we met each other and worked with folks from around the world there. But now, today, we're going to talk about we're going to get to the real business about how museums can shift from just talking to acting. But before we start that conversation, Lucimara, I always like people to tell us a little bit about their own background, to give us a sense of how you got to where you are now. So if you could start us off with that, and then we'll start into the main part of the conversation.
Oh, hello, everyone. I'm not sure if it's day or night where you are now. So just want to say hello. I'm really happy to be here. I work with Paul in China for different museums professionals from ICOM ITC program. It was a pleasure. So it's great to be here again and exchanging knowledge. Well, Paul, when you ask me about my background, I love museums, but my business is about transforming lives. So I worked in nonprofit sector in my whole 20 years of a career path, but it varies from museums, arts organizations, and social organizations. So in the very beginning, I did communications and marketing as my background in São Paulo. And then I worked for the Biennial, the foundation, the Biennial of Arts. But then I went to do a master in arts administration in Boston, Boston University, which gave me the opportunity to work at the Children's Museum at the development department. And I also work at the Guggenheim Museum. So at that point, I got a knowledge about the US market and how the museums there, where you are, work. So for 2 years, I spent some time doing research and working in the US. And then when I came back, I worked with various arts organizations, and I devote my career to organizations that transform lives throughout different ways. So at some point, I also worked for a human rights organization called ActionAid, which gave me the grasp to now be able to talk about social justice. I'm part of the board of ActionAid now, 10 years later. But I was a fundraiser there. I was responsible to start up their fundraising operation. So I learned a lot from Greece, from Italy, and from the UK. Then I became deputy director for the British Council in Brazil for the arts. And now I'm deputy director for the Museum of Modern Art in Rio. But last but not least, why I'm here, it's because I founded an organization called Museu Vivo, which is basically an organization devoted to talk about regeneration, economical sustainability, and innovation in museums. And I have devoted 3 years to this organization because I did a UNESCO program, which is called Change Makers Program, specifically for redesigning sustainability in multiple areas. So now I match the museums with the sustainability agenda throughout Museu Vivo. So that's why I want to bring you the whole spectrum of my career, but really work in different ways for the same purpose.
Oh, that's great. And of course, we will include links to the organizations and resources. You mentioned that. Now they've been on YouTube. I'll say in the description below. But and I'm always happy to talk to someone who has development experience, because development people raise the money and exhibits people spend the money. So that's important. But we want to talk about I think two related aspects, and you touched on the notion of regeneration, which I'd like you to talk about a little bit, but also the related notion of museums truly being agents of change with the communities that they are part of. And I think what I would like to stress is, we talked before we started recording the video, museums talk a great game, but talk, as we all know, does not always immediately translate to action or meaningful action. And so I would really be interested in you talking about these interrelated ideas about how museums can be agents of change and what this broader notion of regeneration means to both society and museums as part of society. And maybe you give us some examples and ideas so people can take action from this video and not just say, wow, is that Lucimara smart? She had so many good ideas, but also, wow, these are examples. And again, like I said, we'll provide resources in that, but I think that's a big mouthful to start out with, but you are up to the task. So I'm gonna see if you can get us started with the conversation with those ideas of regeneration and museums being agents of change.
Well, we can definitely do this as a starting point, but it's a deep, deep conversation because it engages with different sectors of society. So regeneration sounds a new concept, but it's actually a natural thing. Everything on earth, on nature, is about regeneration. So every plant that grows because something has been gutted before. It's about a cycle. It's about a dynamic cycle, an organic way of engaging with the ecosystem, about a systemic change. The fact is that the planet has get to a limit now of its resources. And because we don't admit this, or because we have uncomfortable zone of admitting the fact that we are on a urgent call from Earth regeneration, doesn't make this spontaneous easy to understand. So basically what it is, everybody talks about sustainability, right? And this has been a concept that is very well spread out about economical, social, and environmental and cultural sustainability. It's a concept that everybody knows. The fact is that we cannot sustain what is already exhausted of its resources. We have to recap, restore all the territories, and then we can again talk about sustainable futures, sustainable territories, sustainable societies. And so regeneration, it's a field of study that you can also look into. Schumacher College in the UK. They have great professionals of regeneration in all fields that calls attention for the fact that we have to take care, we have to take responsibility, regardless if you are a company, if you are a museum, if you are a university. Now we have to deal with earth regeneration. So I can give you an example. If you think about the fact that the ambientalists, the environmentalists, now what they say is that it requires 3 planets to feed, to actually provide the resources that we would need for the size of population that we are getting into. Now, what does it mean in terms of regeneration? We need to be sure that we have natural heritage to the future generations. So for example, if a museum deals with biological collection, if they deal with natural history collection, or if a museum deals with histories of colonization, they are all interrelated to the fact that now we have an exhausted or extinction situation in the planet. We all need to take responsibility. So regeneration, and there are a lot of authors that people can read. One of them is Daniel Worth. He came here to Brazil with a book of regenerative cultures, which is specifically saying that we cannot change, make a big change if we don't change the mindset. So let's take a point. The ambientalists are saying about climate change is a big issue. Fine, they have all data. It's all there. It's hard data. It's crystal clear. However, to change people's behavior, we need to get into their hearts, to their beliefs, their customs, their way of living. And who deals with this? Us, in the theaters, in the communities. We deal with the culture as a living, as a way of being. So all the historians and the practitioners, the people that are doing practices now in regeneration, what they say is that museums can be big allies as agents of change for regeneration, because we deal with people's hearts, with people's mind, with people's networks, and with people's community. And also we deal with the local communities. So one important thing, Paul, is to say that regeneration is a global concept. It's about us taking care of planet together. But the change will start in local communities, in our neighborhood. It's a museum. It starts to dealing with a harvest that is a community harvest that deals with people in the neighborhood. It's starting something. But then you can see also museums like the UN Life Museum, which has been launched very recently. It's a digital museum. They're on a global scale. But we have museums like in Brazil, the Cariri Museum, which works in a poor area in the northeast of Brazil. But they have regenerated the whole area in the bioma based on the work they have been doing of economic redone of the area with what they call organic museums. The museums are done in the house of the people. It's done throughout the restoration of culture. If you restore the culture in the rural areas, people learn how to restore the land. They go back to harvest. They bring the culture throughout storytelling. So a lot of things of regeneration has to deal with culture change. So that's why we are also bringing museums into the place. Everything has to deal with change, needs to take care of the mindset of a group or a community or a set of values. We're talking about a set of values that led us to the extinction of territories, the biodiversity. This is what we have to be said. So I was listening to one video someday from the Leicester University, from Robert James, and he was saying that we have 55,000 museums in 202 countries. What a big change this whole community can make if they understand that we have to tell new stories that will set the scene for a new future. So that's the basis, the baseline to start the conversation.
Well, as if people haven't already realized that you may be the most energetic person in the museum business. I'm sure they now know it for sure. And you I think have provided a good anchor, the notion of reaching people's hearts and minds as the way to really create sustained regeneration and to make museums a meaningful part of people's communities. So you mentioned a couple resources and examples there. I'd like you, if you could, to maybe mention another example or two of museums specifically that you think are doing good work in this regard, because I think one thing that is difficult for our museum colleagues, and it's human nature, when you articulate a problem that is literally a global set of problems, you can either be the type of person who's like, okay, there's the mountain, I'm going to climb it, or you look at this and you're like, I'm just one person, I'm one museum, how can I really work on this global set of issues and problems. So I think if you might be able to give some examples of museums or some examples of actions or things that people watching this video could take away for their own situations, that would really be not only helpful, but hopeful. Helpful for the mind and hopeful for the heart. So
I think each museum works with a typology of change. So biology, it's a territory that it can take as change. If they look at science, it's something else. If they look at arts, it's something else. So the first thing is to look at your typology. The second thing is your geographic territory, where you are, what has happened in the city, who were the people that were there before we arrived, how they can be honored, what are the problems that the city is facing. So there are many things that can be done. So I can give you examples. I guess the New Zealand museum that is now called Te Papa is one of the greatest examples because they were capable of doing a change in a big institutional museum representing the nation. And now if you go on their website, it's easy, you can go now, you're gonna see that everything is translated into the Maori language. Everything is devoted to not only having the English language out there, but also to honor the people whose collections actually come from them. They are representing the collection. So the Papa created something very important, which is a repatriation committee with people from the indigenous community who can honor the remains of indigenous territories that needs to be ritualized. They're sacred spaces, they're objects, they are not only any object. So repatriation is a very important decision of the museum. Museums in Canada are doing this, museums elsewhere are doing this, in countries where there is space to regenerate the relationship with the people that representing the stories, the narratives and objects of the collections. So I would really encourage you to look at the Papa because the Papa go beyond the past history to bring this to the present when they create the first innovative hub there, which is called Mahuki, which is very interesting, is the fact that it doesn't mean that when you respect and go back a little bit to the past in terms of honoring the people, that you're going backwards. It means that we are also taking respect for this, but going forward in terms of innovating the museum. The second example is the Kigali Memorial in Rwanda, one of the biggest genocide in our time. And I worked and had the chance to work with Jason from UX for Good. They took designers from the foundation of the memorial to work with the museum staff to be able to help the people who gets there to do something, not only think about what happened, not only see, but to do something. What they call zova curve, which is basically a name of the elephant there, Izovo, which means that people get aware of the issue, then they got really upset because they feel, wow, this should not happen anymore. But then how you museum help them to act on behalf of these people? Then it's the curve, which means how you can act on behalf of the museum, what you can do, donating, being volunteer, or helping other people that are safe, are living similar conditions now. Museums like that also, we can see a situation in the Liverpool Slavery Museum. They also work with NGOs to avoid contemporary and modern slavery in India. So when you get to the museum, you learn about the diaspora in the UK and the relation with slavery from colonial times, but you know exactly that what the public can do now. Why am I giving these examples? I work for ActionAid. It's a big NGO in 150 countries. And we understand that a lot of people that have privilege, they don't know what's going on with people that don't have rights. And if you get them a chance to know deeply and get committed, they may donate or act on your behalf. But museums will not teach how to do this. So I really encourage museums to work with the NGOs, to respect the fact that by a partnership, and the Museum of Liverpool is doing this, not only the slavery, other museums also do, of course. It's not, museums are great for amusement, and I know Paul works a lot with the joy and amusement of museums, and you can also get fundraising from amusement, gamification for donation, crowdfunding, match funding. It's fine, but it's a serious issue. It doesn't mean that it can't be fun. So what the UX for Good did for Kigali, it's taking a contemporary approach, but people want to be part of it. Give them a chance. So I would say that the Papa, Kigali, important possibilities of doing this. And the third example, MASP is one of the biggest art museum in Brazil, in an urban area in São Paulo. And they're taking responsibility of doing specific exhibits facing the issue of racism, the issue of indigenous territories in Brazil, the issue of sexism, lots of things. And they are building narratives yearly of exhibitions that can tell new stories. So the curator invited last year 3 Afro-descendants curators to be part of the show, to curate it together. This is very, very important. And then they received an award from the arts newspaper, you can see last year, of one of the best exhibitions in the whole world, that was called the Afro-Atlantic Histories Exhibition. So there are examples that you can see. And Paul, the most recent now, when the American Natural History Museum decides to take the Roosevelt statue, and we have to address this. It took a long time. A lot of movements were there. I know Marcia Fori, one of the leaders of the decolonized displaced movement. She was here with me here in Brazil for a week, but they did it. So they deserve now to be recognized, that the museum heard the contemporary issue, they act, and now they must go beyond that. Now they will really be able of doing something if they want in terms of being anti-racist, and going with this with a clear narrative for action, not only for thinking, but for action. But I would say that they act, and they deserve also congratulations for taking this decision for now.
Yeah, that was, it's interesting. I think maybe an important word that you use that is a common thread in that rapid world tour of museums that you gave us is partnership. And the idea that, a true partnership is a partnership where people feel trust and feel that they are equal partners and feel like they can have robust conversations and not can disagree respectfully with each other, but still to accomplish common aims. I think all the examples you mentioned, including removing the Roosevelt statue from the front of the American Museum of Natural History, which I don't need to tell you, of course, lots of people are happy about, but not everyone is happy about that. Obviously, I think it's the right thing to do. I'm a museum person. I know the museum well and people who work there, but I think that was important to do. But that notion of partnership.
Can I just say one thing about partnership? Because I think you brought something very important. I have here with me those, bless you. I have here with me, those are some cards that work in the workshops with museums here in Brazil, that it's called the SDGs cards. So if you are now listening to this and you haven't yet reached to the SDGs, which are the Social Development Goals, from the United Nations goals until the agenda of the 2030, until they have to get into the goals. The 17th goal is about partnership, what Paul just said. There are 17 goals, and the the ultimate, the last one, it's about partnership, because they say that without partnership, you don't do any of the others. So it's very important to know that a lot of museums are now being trained and informed about how to work with SDGs cross countries. And there are people work with this. So Jasper Visser is one of them, and other people. I have done workshops in Brazil here in the Museum of Tomorrow for museums. But the fact is that when we talk about regeneration, that Paul really point, it's not easy to do by ourselves, because the function of the museum before was to preserve, to educate, and to exhibit. But more than ever, we are learning from the pandemic that what museums have to show, it's not more important now. The more important thing is what they have to say and what they have to do. So the SDGs can help you on that sense, because the exhibition can help, can be there, can happen, fine, but it's part of something bigger, which is a change that you have decided as museum to convey. So I just want
Well,
to bring this.
yeah, no, I think that may be the thing for everyone who is watching this video to really grab onto, in the sense of who are the people, who are the groups, who are the communities that you can partner with, who can be partners in an effort to act, you know, and those partners come in lots of, you know, all the examples you gave, those partners come in lots of different contexts and in lots of different ways. So I think, you know, if there's one takeaway, which is not an easy takeaway necessarily, it is, who are the partners? Who are the partners that you and your museum, your institution, your communities work with to affect these changes? And so that might
Yeah.
be that might be that might be the perfect takeaway from this video. But before I call that the takeaway, I'll say, I don't know if you have any last word or last thought that you'd like to share, and then I have a question for you after you share your last.
Oh, I was checking the time. You usually take half an hour, more or less.
Yeah, more or less.
I think I would say, Paul, just respond to your you provoke in terms of what museums can do and takeaways. Some important things. Before you look inside, internally, how you are organized on your acquisition collections policies, how you are recruiting people, is there a diversity policy, how you are representing the museum, if you are a representation of discriminated group. So you can look at the networks that can support your voice in the museum. Another possibility is also is to engage the audiences for a major change. Sometimes it's hard to convince board members and to convince policymakers. So it's important that you look around. Some of the networks that I would suggest, and Paul will send to you on this video about the research I have done, is the mass action in the US, the Museum that Talks in the UK, or the We Are Museums that Diane is doing wonderfully as well with France and Denmark as well. And we here in Brazil, Museu Vivo and also Hiper Museus, we have created a network together with Inspirações Ilimitadas. We have done also a possibility of this. But the major thing is look at these networks that can support you. The other thing is about study regeneration and the SDGs deeply. You're going to see a lot of resources, a lot of videos. At Icon Kyoto, there was a great presentation about how museums can engage into the SDGs, which is really interesting cross-country. And the other thing is don't be afraid of innovation, which is a hard thing in museums. But now the difference is that it's not innovation just because we are doing a new thing in the museum. It's about being relevant for the future. I would say that social innovation museums now, it's urgent. because of the relevance of the museums for the future. And I think there is a way of you provoking your leaders in the museum of taking action now, because this will be important for the whole segment. Museums that it doesn't need to be global, it can be local, but museums being agents of change will actually be much more related to relevance than ever before. And I just want to say about the pandemic crisis, Paul, that I think when the museums were set aside from their spaces of comfort zones, they also have a chance to look that objects, collections, and physical space are not the most important thing. And they got closer to the digital. And digital is also a mean for change. So I think it's very important. And if I have a final point, if you look at politicians and issues that are going on in different countries at the moment, they got there also because of the digital power. People are also getting elected throughout the digital power. So what I would say that digital knowledge is power. Digital knowledge is a commitment for the future generations. So museums can be there. And what I like to say in this pandemic time is that the museums are not there anymore. They're here. They're here on my cell phone. Here they are. Here's my museum. So you can talk to people and be closer to them and take advantage in a positive way for the common good. It's not about a specific agenda. It's a common good. Museums are united now for a common good. And I would say this is a very important thing. It's a responsibility.
That's yet another way to think about being partners between the museum and their communities and their visitors through now digital means, when many museums are not able to bring people to their buildings. Well, exactly. I'll just stand in awe of your energy and enthusiasm again, and I really appreciate you taking the time all the way from Brazil to share some of your ideas. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, we'll obviously put we have a lot of resources and links to put in for this description, but that's great. I think people really appreciate that. And I just want, I can't help but especially now that you're working at an art museum, to ask about the piece of art right behind you there. If you could, you know, people are watching you, and then they see this. Is it a painting behind you? So I don't know if you want to just briefly, since we're museum people, mention what's going on with that.
Oh, it's actually from an artist from Rio de Janeiro, a carioca artist from Copacabana. It's not a fancy painting from a very well-known artist, but it's very meaningful for me because I am Afro-descendant, but I also just learned recently that I also have how you say this, 4 times my avó, minha abuela,
grandmother,
tatarabuela, 4 levels,
yeah.
Indigenous. She was the indigenous representative of the family. But the key thing is to inspire us, because I think these people have a lot of knowledge to bring us, because they're very close to nature. So they can teach us about regeneration so much.
And that's a way to tie back to your 4-time great-grandmother.
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah,
that's
my
great.
4-time great-grandmother was an indigenous woman. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I asked you about that painting. Well, thanks again, Lucimara. I really appreciate you taking the time. And like I said, I think we maybe partnership is one of the big watchwords to join agents of change and regeneration in this conversation, in terms of how to change those things into actions with the communities we serve. So thanks again very much.
Oh, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk. I have been enjoying the videos on your channel. And the key thing I want to tell you is about the possibility of sharing spaces for occupation and giving voice to people that matters. I think you are giving opportunity for people to hear, but also people to talk. So being a woman with a lot of knowledge, but a woman Afro descendant from Brazil, with you from the US, a white man, but a bright man. So I really appreciate that we are here talking, and I really appreciate your work. It has been a great time we spent together in China in a combination of a partnership and expertise. So really thank you for doing this. It's been great.
That's very kind. Thank you. And they really got their money's worth in China when we were teaching there, I'll just say. That was a lot of fun. That was really a lot of fun working with ICOM in the International Training Center. All right.
It's true.
All right. Thanks. Be well. Best to you and your family in Brazil.
Thank you very much for you as well, and everyone who's watching as well, to be safe and with health at home and with your family.